What if I told you that every Victorian mansion was not just a home, but a stage where stories capable of destroying entire families unfolded behind closed doors? These stately buildings, with their stone facades and tall windows, served as the perfect mask for human dramas that were never meant to become public knowledge. The architects of the time designed houses not only for comfort, but also to reliably preserve the secrets of their owners. The walls of these mansions absorbed the whispers of conspiracies, the smell of burned letters, and the weight of unspoken grievances, creating an atmosphere of eternal tension. The external splendor of stucco moldings and velvet curtains distracted guests' attention from the hidden corridors used by those whose presence was supposed to be concealed. Reputation in the Victorian era was valued more than gold, and complex labyrinths of double standards and double walls were created to preserve it. Watch the video to the end to find out what secret rooms and unwritten rules helped the elite hide their darkest secrets while maintaining a flawless facade. What if I told you that every wealthy home had a portal separating two completely different dimensions? I am talking about the famous door covered with green cloth, which served as an invisible border between the master's part of the house and the servants' quarters. This door was not just a functional element of the interior, but a symbol of the insurmountable social divide that existed under one roof. Architects designed this passageway to be as inconspicuous as possible to guests, but always accessible to staff. The green cloth, tightly stretched over a massive wooden frame, served as sound insulation, absorbing any noise from the servants' quarters. Behind this door ended the world of luxurious carpets, polished mahogany, and quiet conversations by the fireplace. There began the world of stone floors, constant bustle, the smells of cooking, and the clanging of copper utensils. The main rule for this boundary was absolute silence. The sounds of work were not to penetrate the owner's relaxation area. The hinges of such a door were lubricated with particular care so that it opened and closed absolutely silently, as if by magic. Any squeak or knock coming from behind the green upholstery was considered a gross violation of professional etiquette. The passageway design often included not one, but two doors, with a small vestibule between them to create an airlock. This prevented not only the penetration of sounds, but also the spread of kitchen odors, which were considered vulgar in living quarters. A servant passing through this airlock had to instantly change his facial expression and manner of behavior. Beyond the threshold, he was an invisible mechanism, but here, in the hallway, he became a person with his own concerns again. This architectural element allowed the owners to live under the illusion that their daily life was running smoothly on its own, without the involvement of outsiders. The cloth-covered door also served as a barrier to rumors and conversations that could damage the family's reputation. The servants knew everything about their masters, but the green door symbolically locked this knowledge inside the household wing. Crossing this line without being summoned or without obvious necessity was considered a serious offense, punishable by dismissal. Even the air on either side of this door seemed different. On one side, it was cool and perfumed, while on the other, it was heavy and stuffy. The upholstery material was not chosen at random. Thick woolen fabric dampened vibrations and lasted a long time, despite constant use. Nails with wide decorative heads, holding the cloth in place, often formed geometric patterns, giving the door an official look. On the master's side, such a door was often disguised as a wall panel or hidden in the shadow of a staircase. It was ubiquitous, but at the same time had to remain invisible to the eye of a noble guest. It was through this passage that news, newspapers, and letters entered the house, which could change the fate of the mansion's inhabitants. Here at the threshold, delicate matters requiring confidentiality and the absence of unnecessary witnesses were often decided. The green door witnessed secret meetings, the exchange of notes, and quiet tears shed over injustice. It separated not only spaces, but also the fates of people who had lived side by side for years. Sometimes late at night, when the house was asleep, this boundary became permeable to forbidden visits. Young aristocrats could slip through to the other side in search of entertainment, breaking every conceivable rule of propriety. However, in the morning, the door would once again become an impenetrable bastion, keeping silent about the night's events. This hypocrisy was woven into the very fabric of the Victorian house, like threads into the door's upholstery. For the owners, this door was a guarantee of their peace of mind and confidence in their own exclusivity. It allowed them to ignore the hard work that ensured their comfortable existence every day. It was an instrument of social control, embodied in wood and fabric. I would be very interested to hear your point of view. What do you think about such a harsh architectural division between people living in the same house? Write about it in the comments. Are you ready to learn the truth about how people who were not supposed to be seen moved around? The Victorian mansion was permeated by a network of hidden staircases and narrow corridors that guests might not even have guessed existed. These invisible arteries were vital to the functioning of a large house, but they had to remain hidden from the owner's eyes. Architects masterfully incorporated these service passages into the voids between the main walls and behind the formal halls. The staircases for the servants were steep, narrow, and devoid of any decoration or amenities. The steps on such staircases were often made of simple stone or cheap wood, as no one was supposed to see them. There were no carpets here, so the servants' footsteps echoed hollowly in the enclosed space of the well. The steps were higher than usual, which made climbing them with heavy buckets of coal or water a real challenge. The walls in these corridors were usually painted in dark, practical colors so that dirt and soot would not be visible. Lighting here was sparse. Gas lamps were used sparingly, and it was often necessary to move around in semi-darkness. This system of corridors allowed staff to appear in any room as if out of nowhere and disappear just as quietly. A maid could enter her mistress's bedroom, light the fireplace, and leave without meeting anyone in the main corridor. Footmen used these passages to deliver trays of food to the upper floors before the dishes cooled down. This required excellent physical fitness and knowledge of the layout of the house, which sometimes resembled a maze. Mistaking the door and coming out into the front gallery with a bucket of slop was considered an indelible disgrace. Hidden staircases often ran behind the walls of dining rooms and living rooms, creating an additional sound barrier. However, in these narrow passageways, servants could hear much of what was discussed in the formal halls. The walls had ears, and those ears belonged to those who used the back stairs. The information obtained in this way became currency in the world of servants, allowing them to anticipate the mood of their masters. But this knowledge had to be used with extreme caution so as not to give themselves away. Separate staircases were often provided for male and female servants to prevent flirting in the workplace. The moral character of the staff was monitored as strictly as the cleanliness of the silverware. The architecture of the house dictated the rules of behavior, separating the flow of people and preventing unwanted encounters. Some houses even had separate tunnels for suppliers so that they would not enter the mansion itself. Everything was subordinated to one goal: to preserve the ideal image of a calm and measured life upstairs. These corridors were cold, as heating them was considered an unnecessary waste of resources. In winter, drafts blew through the cracks in the attic floors and windows. Servants had to work in difficult conditions, constantly moving between the heat of the kitchen and the cold of the stairwells. This often led to illnesses, which also had to be hidden in order not to lose one's job. Endurance was the main quality required to work in such a house. Interestingly, the doors leading from the black staircase to the living quarters were often disguised with wallpaper or mirrors. From the room side, they looked like part of the wall, not disturbing the harmony of the interior. The handles on such doors were made small and inconspicuous, or were completely absent from the inside. Only a knowledgeable person could find the entrance to this hidden world by pressing a secret panel. This created the impression that the house was served by invisible spirits rather than living people. These staircases were also used to carry away everything that should not offend the eyes of the inhabitants of the house: dirty laundry, ashes from fireplaces, rubbish. It was a path for all the unclean things that human life inevitably produces. The system of clean and dirty flows was thought out in detail at the design stage of the building. The architect became an accomplice in a great deception, hiding the everyday underside of life. Even in the event of a fire, these narrow staircases could become a deadly trap due to their steepness and narrowness. But the safety of the servants was the last thing on anyone's mind, with priority given to aesthetics and the convenience of the owners. These blood clots of the house were overflowing with movement from early morning until late at night. Life in a Victorian mansion never stopped. It was just hidden behind walls. How much do you think the architecture of your own home influences your lifestyle and habits? What I am about to show you is prohibited in 12 countries as a violation of privacy. But in the Victorian era, it was standard practice in construction. Mansions were designed with a paranoid fear of being overheard by outsiders in mind. The walls of rooms where important conversations took place were turned into veritable vaults of silence, thanks to complex construction solutions. Double partitions were used, with the space between them filled with a mixture of sawdust, cork crumbs, and felt. This was done not so much for warmth as to ensure that not a single word left the confines of the study or boudoir. Heavy velvet curtains on windows and doors served the same purpose, absorbing sound waves. Several layers of carpet spread across the floor muffled footsteps and prevented sound from spreading to the lower floors. Furniture was arranged in such a way as to create additional barriers to sound, breaking up echoes. Even the ceilings were decorated with coffers, recesses that, in addition to their beauty, improved the acoustics inside, but did not let sound escape outside. However, this same architecture had the opposite effect, creating ideal conditions for espionage. There were special acoustic tubes laid in the walls to transmit orders to the kitchen or servants' rooms. These copper pipes, ending in bells, ran through the entire house like a nervous system. But the trick was that sound traveled in both directions unless the plug was closed. A servant, putting his ear to the bell in the basement, could clearly hear what the masters were talking about in the living room or bedroom. It was an unintentional but powerful tool for internal espionage, which many owners forgot about. Some houses had specially designed whisper galleries where sound was focused at certain points. This allowed the owner, standing at one end of the hall, to hear what guests were whispering at the other end. Such architectural traps were used to gather gossip and identify disloyal acquaintances. Knowledge of the acoustic characteristics of one's home gave the owner a huge advantage in social games. Secrets whispered became louder than a shout thanks to the geometry of the walls. Ventilation shafts designed to remove smoke from gas horns also often became channels for information leaks. The sound of a voice could travel through these channels between floors, reaching the most unexpected places. Guests confident in their privacy might not suspect that their conversation was being broadcast to the next room. Experienced schemers knew about these features and always checked the room before an important conversation. The silence of the walls was deceptive, and it was dangerous to trust it. The keyholes in Victorian doors were large and wide, making them a vulnerable spot. To prevent eavesdropping and peeping, special brass shutters were used to cover the hole from the inside. The keys had complex beards to fill the keyhole as much as possible, leaving no gaps. But even these measures did not always protect against a curious ear pressed against the door. Fear of exposure forced people to speak in hints and allegories even in their own bedrooms. Servants cleaning the rooms often deliberately left the doors ajar, creating a draft that carried sounds. This was part of the unspoken war for information that was waged in every large house. Knowing the secrets of their employers was a form of insurance for the staff, a guarantee that they would not be thrown out onto the street. The architecture of the house became a battlefield, where acoustics and attentiveness were the weapons. Hidden niches behind bookcases or panels could be used not only to store things, but also to hide a person. In old mansions, such places often remained from the days of religious persecution or civil wars. In the Victorian era, they were converted into safes or simply forgotten until someone found them by accident. The discovery of such a space always caused alarm. Who could be hiding there and for how long? The house held memories of the past that could invade the present at any moment. Engineers of the time tried to combat the noise of water pipes by wrapping them in felt and hiding them deep in the walls. The sound of running water or the hum of pipes was considered the height of impropriety, destroying the atmosphere of a noble home. But it was impossible to completely hide technical sounds, and they served as a reminder that a house is a complex machine. Perfect silence was an unattainable dream that people strove for by erecting new barriers. Each house was a unique resonator of human destinies, tuned to a specific frequency of drama. The walls did not simply divide the space, they filtered the truth, allowing only what was safe to hear to pass through. Living in such a house meant constantly controlling the volume of one's voice and the content of one's words. Don't forget to like this if you were also struck by this acoustic paranoia of the past. What if everything you were taught about the role of women is outdated? The boudoir or morning room of a Victorian lady is often perceived as a place for relaxation, needlework, and light reading of novels. In reality, it was a veritable command center where decisions determining the fate of the family and the home were made. It was here, behind an elegant secretary desk, that the mistress kept the complex accounts of social life and managed the invisible threads of intrigue. It was the only place in the house where a woman had complete and undivided power. The furniture in this room often contained hiding places that even her husband did not know about. Secretaries with double bottoms, hidden drawers and tabletops, concealed compartments in boxes. All of this was a necessity. Here were kept letters that could compromise, bills that needed to be hidden, and diaries with candid thoughts. The art of hiding papers was as important a skill for a lady as embroidery or playing the piano. The key to the secretary desk was always kept by the mistress, hanging on a chain at her waist or hidden in the folds of her dress. Not only wood burned in the boudoir fireplace, but also evidence, notes from secret admirers, drafts of ill-considered letters. Fire was the most reliable ally in preserving one's reputation, destroying paper without a trace. The ashes were carefully mixed so that even fragments of text could not be recovered. This ritual of destroying information was a familiar part of the morning routine of many society ladies. The room, which seemed to be a haven of comfort and peace, was in fact witness to the feverish destruction of traces. This is where the morning mail was brought, and sorting letters was a moment of high tension. A single letter with an inappropriate stamp or familiar handwriting could cause panic, which had to be instantly concealed. The servants who brought the tray with the correspondence watched the lady's reaction closely. The ability to keep a straight face when reading bad news was honed through years of training in front of the mirror. The mirrors in the boudoir, by the way, served not only for dressing, but also for monitoring the space behind her. This was also where her closest friends were received and conversations that were not intended for male ears were held. They discussed matches for their daughters, their husbands' financial problems, and scandals in society. The boudoir was a center for the exchange of information, a gossip exchange where public opinion was formed. The walls of this room absorbed strategies for marriage alliances and plans for social revenge. Female friendship was intertwined with rivalry here, creating a complex pattern of relationships. Particular attention was paid to the location of this room. It was often next to the bedroom, but had a separate exit to the corridor. This allowed the hostess to receive visitors, such as doctors or merchants, without passing through the formal halls. This arrangement provided a certain degree of freedom and the opportunity to hide unwanted visits. Visits from dressmakers and seamstresses also took place here, and often, under the guise of fittings, completely different matters were discussed. Fabrics and lace served as an excellent cover for passing notes and news. The boudoir often held the mistress's medical secrets, bottles of laudanum, smelling salts, and tonics of dubious composition. Victorian medicine made extensive use of opiates. An addiction to them was a common but carefully concealed problem. Beautiful crystal bottles on the dressing table could contain dangerous poisons disguised as medicines. Nervous fits were often treated here, behind closed doors, away from the eyes of the household. The interior of the room reflected the taste and status of its owner, but every detail could have a dual purpose. A screen could hide not only a change of clothes, but also an unwanted guest. Deep armchairs allowed one to relax, but their high backs protected against drafts and prying eyes. Even the embroidery on the embroidery hoop could be a code or a way to calm trembling hands. Every object here was part of a complex system of protecting personal space. Ultimately, the boudoir was a fortress within a fortress, the last line of defense for women's independence. Here, masks were removed and ladies could be themselves, tired, frightened, or calculating. This space was guarded more strictly than a bank vault because it held something more valuable: one's true self. Where do you think such a control center is located in a modern home, where the family's most important secrets are kept? In Victorian mansions, the layout of the spouse's bedrooms said more about their relationship than any words could. The tradition of having separate bedrooms for husband and wife was not just a matter of convenience, but the norm for high society. These rooms were often connected by an adjoining door, which became the most significant symbol of marriage. This door could be open, inviting intimacy, or locked with a bolt, signifying a cold war between the spouses. The status of the relationship was determined by the position of the bolt, not by vows at the altar. The man's bedroom was more ascetic and practical in design, often decorated in dark colors. It served as an extension of his study, a place where he could be alone and prepare to go out into society. There were no unnecessary decorations here. Everything was subject to strict order and functionality. The valet had access to this room, knowing his master's habits down to the smallest detail. It was a territory of male independence, where the wife could only enter with permission or by invitation. The women's bedroom, on the other hand, was a realm of textiles, soft furnishings, and pastel colors. It was a space created to demonstrate femininity and fragility. However, behind this decorativeness lay loneliness and often alienation from one's spouse. Women spent hours here, surrounded by maids preparing for sleep or awakening. The ritual of dressing and undressing took a long time and required assistance, turning an intimate process into a public spectacle. Separate rooms allowed spouses to lead virtually autonomous lives under one roof. They could avoid seeing each other until breakfast or even dinner if they wished. This helped to avoid minor domestic conflicts, but it also created an emotional gap. Communication was reduced to formal visits, which were regulated by strict etiquette. Spontaneity in relationships was considered a sign of bad taste and a lack of upbringing. This layout also made it possible to hide illnesses and ailments from one spouse to the other. If a husband or wife was feeling unwell, they could simply not open the connecting door, citing fatigue. This preserved the illusion of eternal health and vigor, which was so important for one's image. Weakness and pain were experienced alone, behind thick curtains and closed doors. No one was supposed to see the suffering, not even the closest person. In the event of a marital quarrel, separate bedrooms became isolated camps. The door between them became a front line that no one dared to cross first. The silence could last for weeks while outwardly the couple continued to portray the perfect family at receptions. The house became a theater where the actors met only on stage, while behind the scenes they lived different lives. This hypocrisy corroded their souls but preserved outward appearances. Sometimes there was a dressing room or a small passageway between the bedrooms that served as a buffer. This neutral territory allowed for a smooth transition from one space to another. Are you ready for the shocking truth about where gentlemen actually spent their time? In every large mansion, there was an area where women were tacitly and sometimes strictly forbidden to enter. This was the smoking room or billiard room, often located in a remote wing or on the basement floor. It was a space with a completely different atmosphere. It smelled of expensive tobacco, leather, and strong alcohol. In contrast to the bright and airy living rooms, this room was dimly lit, with heavy wooden paneling and dark wallpaper. Here, men could take off the masks of propriety they wore in the presence of ladies. In this room, frock coats were unbuttoned, ties were loosened, and conversations were held that would have made ladies blush. Politics, horse racing, card debts, and dubious connections were discussed. It was a kind of men's club inside the house, a territory free from the strict rules of etiquette. The walls of this room heard more dirty secrets than a confessional in a church. Architecturally, this room was often equipped with enhanced ventilation to prevent tobacco smoke from entering the rest of the house. The smell of cigars was considered offensive to women's sense of smell, so isolation was strict. The doors were covered with leather or had double vestibules for airtightness. Sometimes the exit from the smoking room led directly to the garden, so that gentlemen could go out to refresh themselves without passing through the hall. This created an autonomous route for male company. It was here that entire fortunes were often lost at the card table or roulette wheel. Gambling was the scourge of the aristocracy, and many family estates were lost in rooms like these. Debts of honor were recorded in special notebooks, and dramas of ruin were played out to the sound of billiard balls. But all this remained inside, behind the closed doors of the men's sanctuary. The family could only learn of the collapse when creditors knocked on the door. The room's decor emphasized masculinity, hunting trophies on the walls, weapons, maps, globes. It was a demonstration of strength, power, and conquest, even if the owner never left the county. The furniture was massive, leather, designed for comfortable seating with a glass of brandy. There was no place here for fragile trinkets, only solid and timeless things. The atmosphere was conducive to confidential conversations and secret deals. Only certain servants were allowed in the smoking room, usually old, trusted butlers or footmen. They knew how to be invisible and deaf, filling glasses and cutting cigars. Their silence was generously rewarded as they were witnesses to the weaknesses of men. Knowing who drank and gambled how much gave the servant a certain power over his master. But this power was dangerous and had to be used wisely. Often, this part of the house housed collections of erotic engravings or literature banned by censorship. It was a secret library, accessible only to a select circle of initiates. Men exchanged frivolous books here and discussed juicy news from the lives of actresses and dancers. It was an outlet in a world of puritanical morality where even the legs of the piano were covered with covers. A double life was the norm for a Victorian gentleman. The light in this room was subdued, often using lamps with green shades that created cozy spots of light. This allowed the players and their companions to hide their emotions. The shadows in the corners of the room seemed thicker, hiding the secrets of the night gatherings. Morning came later in this room than in the rest of the house, as thick curtains blocked out the sunlight. The smoking room was a symbol of gender division, brought to architectural perfection. It affirmed a man's right to his secrets and vices, untouchable by family criticism. It was an enclave of patriarchy where the old rules were in full force. The house may have belonged to the family, but this room belonged only to men. And how did the lighting affect the atmosphere in other parts of the house and help hide the true faces of its inhabitants? Gas lighting, which became a symbol of the Victorian era, was not just a source of light, but a true creator of illusions. It gave off an uneven, flickering light that distorted facial features and changed the perception of space. In this flickering glow, people appeared paler and shadows deeper and sharper. Gas lamps hissed and hummed, creating a constant background noise that became the soundtrack of home life. This light was able to hide skin imperfections, dust in the corners, and the true emotions on the faces of those around you. The gas flames consumed a huge amount of oxygen, making the air in the room stuffy and heavy. This caused headaches, fainting, and lethargy, which were often attributed to the nervous disposition of the ladies. In fact, the residents of the mansions were slowly being poisoned by the products of combustion in their own living rooms. Plants in the rooms withered, the gilding on the frames faded, and the wallpaper became covered with a layer of soot. The luxury of the interior slowly died under the influence of progressive lighting. To hide this damage, rich dark colors were used in the decoration: burgundy, emerald, dark blue. They masked the dirt and soot, but made the rooms visually smaller and gloomier. Mirrors were hung not only for beauty, but also to multiply the scarce light and dispel the gloom. The sparkle of crystal chandeliers was an attempt to break through this artificial semi-darkness. The house was turning into a cave with jewels, where light fought against darkness. The shadows cast by gas lamps were mobile, alive, frightening, impressionable residents. It seemed as if ghosts were moving along the walls and statues were coming to life in the corners. This created an atmosphere of nervousness and mysticism that was so characteristic of the Gothic novels of the time. People were afraid of the dark, but the light did not bring them peace either. In the evening, the house changed its appearance, becoming unfamiliar and hostile. Controlling the lighting was an art in itself. It was necessary to light and extinguish the lamps at the right time and monitor the gas pressure. This was done by specially trained servants who moved around the house with long lighting rods. A sudden blackout due to gas supply interruptions could cause real panic. The darkness in the huge house was absolute and frightening, full of rustles and creaks. Gas was explosive, and leaks occurred regularly, leading to tragedies and fires. The smell of gas, to which people had become accustomed, could be a harbinger of disaster. Fear of the invisible threat hung in the air, adding tension to an already difficult life. But it was impossible to give up gas. It was a status symbol, a sign of modernity and wealth. The risk was the price to pay for comfort and the opportunity to prolong the day. Under this flickering light, family scenes were played out, fateful letters were written, and secret alliances were formed. Faces in gaslight looked dramatic, like masks in a theater, hiding true intentions. Eyes shone brighter, and smiles seemed more mysterious. It was lighting for drama, not sincerity. In bedrooms, the light was dimmed to a minimum, leaving only a tiny flame as a nightlight. This blue light was the only companion on sleepless nights. It cast long shadows on the canopy of the bed, turning ordinary furniture into monsters. Childhood fears came to life in this false light, haunting people into old age. Gas lighting even dictated fashion. Makeup and fabrics were chosen to look their best in this particular light. What looked beautiful during the day could look vulgar in the evening, and vice versa. Life was divided into daytime and evening, with different rules and appearances. Light was the director of this endless spectacle. Thus, in the evening, the mansion was transformed into a completely different space, full of illusions and hidden threats. Light did not reveal secrets, but on the contrary, helped to hide them in deep, flickering shadows. In the layout of many Victorian mansions, there was a room whose purpose was not spoken of aloud. It was often located at the very top, under the roof, or at the far end of the corridor, away from the grand staircases. This room served as a home isolation ward for family members suffering from mental illness, addiction, or congenital ailments. Sending a relative to a specialized institution was considered a disgrace to the family, an admission of bad blood. Therefore, the problem was solved within the home by turning one of the rooms into a golden cage. The door to such a room was often covered with felt or leather on the inside to muffle screams or moans. The windows could have bars disguised as decorative elements or open only a small crack. The furniture here was heavy, bolted to the floor without sharp corners, so that the occupant could not harm themselves. Outwardly, it might have looked like an ordinary bedroom, but an experienced eye would immediately notice the details of prison life. Time passed differently here, detached from the rhythm of the rest of the house. Caring for such an invisible relative was entrusted to the most reliable servant or an impoverished female relative. Their task was not only to feed and wash the patient, but also to keep the secret safe. The doctor visited such patients through the back door, often under the cover of night, so as not to arouse the suspicion of neighbors. Treatment bills were paid in cash, without unnecessary entries in the expense books. The person's existence was erased from social life, and they became a living ghost. People often lived in this room for years, growing old and withering away within its four walls. The family could tell guests that their relative had gone on a trip or was living in the countryside to improve their health. The lie was repeated so often that the owners themselves began to believe it. Only the footsteps above or the muffled knocking reminded them of who lived upstairs. This sound was a constant background noise of conscience for those drinking tea in the living room below. Sometimes illegitimate children or relatives with physical deformities that did not fit in with the aesthetics of the era were hidden in such rooms. Beauty and normality were a cult, and any deviations were ruthlessly concealed. A child who could not be presented to society was doomed to a life in the shadows of the attic. Toys and books were their only world, and the view from the window was their only connection to reality. It was cruel mercy, to preserve life but deprive them of freedom. The smells of medicine, camphor, and stale air permeated the walls of this room, impossible to remove by airing it out. Servants did not like to go in there, considering the place cursed or contagious. An atmosphere of hopelessness and endless waiting for the end reigned here. The death of the occupant of such a room often brought not grief, but secret relief to the whole family. The funeral was quiet, modest, without unnecessary witnesses. But sometimes the prisoners found ways to remind people of their existence. An object thrown out of the window, a note passed on by a compassionate maid. Such incidents caused a storm of panic and a tightening of the regime. The fear of exposure kept the family in constant tension, forcing them to be vigilant every minute. The secret bound the household members together in a circle of guilt, making them accomplices in a crime against freedom. The architecture of the house allowed this vacuum to be created, cutting a piece of space out of everyday life. Thick ceilings and remoteness from the central halls made the isolation almost perfect. The house became a jailer, reliable and silent. From the outside, it looked like a palace, but inside it hid a solitary confinement cell. This practice was so widespread that it gave rise to a whole literary trope about the mad woman in the attic. But the reality was much more prosaic and frightening than the novels. It was a story of how reputation ground human destinies with the millstones of brick walls. The story of the secrets upstairs is grim, but let's go downstairs to the heart of social life, where another drama was unfolding. A dinner party in a Victorian mansion was not just a meal, but a complex social ceremony, like a minefield. The dining room was designed as a grand setting for this spectacle, where every detail mattered. The huge mahogany table was not just a piece of furniture, but a barrier separating people. It was often so wide that guests sitting opposite each other could hardly hear each other without raising their voices. This ruled out the possibility of intimate conversations and secrets. All conversations became public. Seating arrangements were a real strategy, comparable to planning a military operation. The hostess had to seat sworn enemies, former lovers, and political opponents in such a way as to avoid scandal. A mistaken seating could lead to a duel or social ostracism. Name cards on the table were the law, which could not be broken. People were forced to sit for hours next to those they hated, maintaining a polite smile. The à la Russe style of serving, where dishes are served one at a time by footmen rather than all at once, came into fashion during this era. This turned dinner into an endless conveyor belt, where guests were dependent on the rhythm of the dishes being served. The footmen standing behind them were silent guardians of order. Their presence made any frank conversation impossible. You ate under the gaze of dozens of eyes, guests, servants, and portraits of ancestors on the walls. The high backs of the chairs created a kind of throne or capsule around each seated person. It was difficult to turn your whole body toward your neighbor. Communication was mainly done by turning your head. The ladies' stiff corsets and the gentlemen's high collars restricted movement, turning people into statues. The whole atmosphere dictated restraint and control over every gesture. Even the way you held your fork could reveal your origins or become a topic of gossip. Mirrors and sideboards with silverware served to demonstrate wealth, but also to reflect light and space. In the mirrors, the hostess could see everything that was happening behind her back, controlling the work of the servants. The glare of silver and crystal dazzled the eyes, distracting from the quality of the food or the tension of the conversation. The external glamour was intended to hide the inner emptiness or tension of the evening. The fate of marriages and business alliances was often decided in this room, but it was done with hints, glances, and subtle nuances. The ability to read between the lines was an essential skill for survival in this society. Refusing a dish, laughing too loudly, spilling wine, all these were signs that were interpreted by society. The dining room was a place of judgment where verdicts were handed down without words. Children were rarely allowed at the adult table. They were kept in the nursery until a certain age. Appearing at dinner was an initiation, an entry into the world of adult games and lies. Here they learned to keep up appearances, hide their disgust, and feign interest in boring topics. It was a school of hypocrisy that every young aristocrat had to attend. The library in a Victorian house was traditionally considered a temple of knowledge and wisdom, but it was often a crypt for financial secrets. It was the head of the family's room, his official residence inside the house. Here, among the rows of leather-bound books, were kept documents that could destroy the family's prosperity in an instant. Mortgage deeds, promissory notes, threatening letters from creditors. All this was hidden behind oak panels or in fake volumes. Safes of that time were often disguised as ordinary furniture or built into walls behind paintings. The art of creating hiding places had reached perfection. You had to press a certain rosette on a carved panel to gain access to the papers. These metal boxes held the truth that the family's luxurious lifestyle had long been sustained only by new debts. The aristocracy was often rich in land but poor in cash, and the library knew this better than anyone. This is where difficult conversations took place with lawyers and managers who were trying to save what remained of the family fortune. The library doors were massive and soundproof so that cries of despair or angry tirades would not reach the ears of the servants. The smell of old paper and leather mingled here with the smell of fear of the future. The head of the family could sit by the fireplace for hours, staring into the fire and trying to find a way out of the financial trap. Bookcases often had glass doors that could be locked. This protected valuable folios from dust and questionable literature from the eyes of children and wives. But sometimes entire shelves were just decoration. Book spines glued to the door of a cabinet that concealed a bar with alcohol or access to a secret staircase. The illusion of education was as important as the illusion of wealth. It was in the library that suicides often took place when disgrace became inevitable. It was considered a noble way out, to leave this life among books, leaving problems behind. A pistol in a desk drawer was as common an item as an inkwell or a paperweight. The walls of this room had seen more male tears than any other place in the house, but they knew how to keep silent. This was also where the estate maps were kept. Plans of the land that was gradually being sold off to pay the bills of tailors and wine merchants. Red lines on the maps marked the sold plots, tightening the ring around the family nest. The library was a chronicle of decline, documented with pedantic precision, but to guests it remained a symbol of the family's stability and antiquity. We walked through the corridors of time and peered behind the closed doors of Victorian mansions. Now you can see that these houses were not just beautiful buildings, but complex mechanisms for preserving secrets and maintaining illusions. From the green door separating worlds to the safe in the library hiding financial ruin, every element of the architecture served a single purpose: to hide the truth and save face. Reputation was an idol to which comfort, sincerity, and even the lives of loved ones were sacrificed. Walls that could listen, rooms that became prisons, and light that distorted reality. Such was the price of a flawless facade. The Victorian era left us a legacy of magnificent architecture, but now we know what lies behind its grand entrances. These houses still stand, keeping silent about the dramas that unfolded within their walls. Which of the secrets of the Victorian house did you find most frightening or unexpected? Was it the whispering gallery or the isolation room in the attic? Write in the comments what you would like to learn about in the next issue. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new investigations into the mysteries of the past.